Well, welcome to CBN News and our CBN News YouTube channel. We are live here as we are waiting for Vice President Kamala Harris to officially announce her VP selection, which she made earlier today. And it's Governor Tim Walz from Minnesota. And this is, at least in the early going, kind of a polarizing pick among the critics, at least. You know, of course, Republicans are going to be on the offensive here, regardless of who the pick was. Some progressives are calling into question the wisdom in this, and CBN's David Brody and John Stolnis are here with me to help break it all down. Gentlemen, here's the news we've been waiting for, and it kind of, as we suspected, it was one of the two, and you see Shapiro there talking. Interesting that he's introducing this, by the way, guys, at this rally. You're looking at this rally in Philadelphia, which is live, but I'll start with you, John. We talked about it. What's your reaction here to the pick?
Well, I think if you'd asked people 2 weeks ago who was going to be her running mate, I don't think Walz would have been at the top of the list. I think he probably might have been third, fourth, fifth. But over the last few weeks, it seems as though his media appearances and his conversations with Kamala Harris, they've really hit it off. And I don't think he helps her as much electorally as he does as a governing partner. And I think in a lot of ways, that's what Kamala Harris was looking for here. She was looking for someone that she liked, that she was comfortable with. He has over a decade's experience on Capitol Hill. So when it comes to having to work with Congress, if there is a Kamala Harris administration, he'll be very comfortable working with folks up on Capitol Hill. And he was there at a time when you did see a little bit more bipartisanship, a little bit more compromise. So he has relationships across the aisle. Now, he was not a big player in Congress while he was there, but he has that experience, and he also has governmental experience, executive experience as the governor of Minnesota. So it was a combination of things. I think if he'd gone with Josh Shapiro, who you see on screen right now, I think it would have really helped her lock up Pennsylvania. Not a sure thing, but it would have been, I think, maybe a pick that, and I think David will be able to speak to this better than I could. I think if you'd asked Republicans which one they would have rather seen her pick, I think Governor Walz is the one they would have rather seen. I think they would have been more apprehensive if it was Governor Shapiro. So I'll be interested to hear what David has to say about that. But I think those are the main reasons why she went with Walz here.
Yeah, I mean, and David, it's interesting because this seems to be, and you've already seen like the tweets and the X posts coming out of Republicans bringing back up after the George Floyd riots. And of course, those were in Minnesota and those were allowed to go on. And now the tagline, at least J.D. Vance used already, was he allowed these riots to go on and then she bailed out the rioters. So they're already digging into this. What do you make of the pick?
Well, there's a lot to decipher. First of all, Josh Shapiro about 15 minutes too early, if you know what I'm saying. Tim Walz will be on Tim Walz will be on stage here soon. He wished he probably would have been second rather than first. Look, here's the deal. It was a good pick by Kamala Harris, and here's why. Ultimately, at the end of the day, elections are all about the base, all about enthusiasm. We don't live in an America as much anymore where you cater to the middle. I know that's the way it's been done for decades, especially in modern American politics. We're too polarized at this point. Is there a middle? There's a middle, sure. But overall, this has always been about get out the base. I mean, it's always been that way anyhow, but now even more so. Tim Walz plays to that for Kamala Harris. She had to go with him. That's the right choice for her. And if she had gone, do I see Kamala? No, is that a video? I can't see what that's
B-roll.
Oh, that's B-roll.
That's just B-roll of them. Yeah, sorry, she's not actually coming out. Yeah, this is live, by the way. Yeah, for everyone watching, that is live. What we're seeing there, this rally that Harris is expected to officially bring in Walz, but Josh Shapiro speaking right now. Go ahead, David.
Sorry about a quick deep fake there. But anyhow. Look, bottom line is that Walz is extremely progressive. That is, don't take Donald Trump's word for it. Just look it up yourself. I mean, the guy was all for sanctuary. He's all for sanctuary cities. He signed a bill giving driver's license to illegals. There's so much more. I mean, he's against fossil fuels. I mean, it's just every single thing. Abortion. There were 5 infants that were born alive during his term as governor. There was a Born Alive Infant Protection Act there, but there was not life-affirming care given to those babies. 5 died during his term. Now you say, well, how do you know 5? Well, the answer is in Minnesota, they have a situation where they actually keep records on this. They have to keep records. Tim Walz, as governor, eventually and did get the Democrat legislature to pass a law that says we're not going to keep records anymore and we're not going to give life-affirming care to these infants. Look, this guy is really, really radical. So the problem is for Kamala Harris, even though it's a good pick because you got to get out the base, problem is that it just reinforces that Kamala made this pick in terms of this guy being a liberal, and it just reinforces the stereotype that she's a liberal as well. And that's something she probably would love to get away from. So she's kind of, there's a good and the bad here. So there's a lot to unpack here. I know I'm rambling here a little bit because I got a lot in my mind, but let me just, which is shocking, by the way, but let me just say this. The reason it's a good pick is because of the momentum, because of the enthusiasm. And this has now become a base versus base election. What do I mean by that? Trump picks J.D. Vance. They're looking for the white, working class, blue collar voter. And I'm not talking about the Republican or conservative. I'm talking about the independents or the soft Ds. That's who they're going for in the Rust Belt. That's what they want. Kamala Harris wants to get the progressives out. This is a left-leaning party. She wants the progressives out. So they're going for their base. It's base versus base. And that's what we have going on. And I'll just say one last thing. Tim Walz is an interesting guy because on paper, he's big time liberal, but he doesn't he kind of looks like, the down to earth grandfather guy, though he's only 60, which is weird. He looks like 73, but anyhow, he's the down to earth grandfather, Midwestern guy, who's got, hunt and rack in the back and, is talking that Midwestern slang. So it's substance for style. And he doesn't. So what the Kamala Harris's campaign is going to try to do is kind of paint him as this Rust Belt guy, because he is, of course, from Minnesota, which is close to some of those Rust Belt states, closer to Iowa, actually. And that's kind of where I see it. There's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, there is. And I mean, the critics that I mentioned at the top, I saw. And I don't have the list in front of me, but there were several sort of talking heads that are on the progressive side that were kind of lamenting the fact that, what we talked about, guys, like, why aren't you going to try to get on a purplish state that maybe you can get a leg up with, right? And, Minnesota hasn't gone to Republicans I think since 1972. And so, this is, it's certainly like you were saying, John, I mean, there's got to be other reasons here for this pick other than, trying to get a little leg up in a state, because this doesn't seem to do that. And when you talk about battle of the bases, guys, I mean, the quote I've already seen out there is this, that, we're going to see it probably 100 million times before the election, is the one where he says, don't shy away from our progressive values. One person's socialism is another person's neighborliness. So, so those quotes are out there, and I'm just really curious on your guys' take on, some of the critics that I've seen from the progressive side that are saying, hey, wait a minute, like, we've got this, purplish, we got to get through, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and these states. What do we do with that? What do you guys make of that?
I think that as far as most of the if there is a complaint from progressives, it's the more moderate progressives. I mean, the squad really likes him. We've seen basically everyone who's a major player in the Democratic Party line up behind him. Even guys like Senator Joe Manchin, who are as far right as you can be, as Democrats have been supportive. So I think there is. I think the only thing you're seeing is that maybe there is some reticence from among some Democrats that Josh Shapiro might have done more to help win this election here, because Pennsylvania is so important. But the thing about the thing they liked about Walz is that they think that, and they believe that he can speak to rural voters. And when you look at Democratic tickets over these last few years, especially the Hillary Clinton campaign when she ran against Donald Trump in 2016. She just did not know how to speak that language. Barack Obama didn't really know how to speak that language. He didn't need to, as it turns out. He won comfortably in his 2 elections. But having a Democrat on the ticket who can comfortably speak to rural voters, who can speak to the same voters that J.D. Vance is going to try and speak to when they're on the campaign trail, in the same part of the country is important for the Harris campaign, because we haven't seen Harris show that ability to do that, to relate to the every person. She hasn't needed to do that since she ascended to the top of the ticket here, but at some point she will. And I think he's going to be dispatched to go to a lot of football games in the Midwest on Friday nights and on Saturdays. He's a former football coach. Like, that's going to be his lane, and he is a good attack dog. That's the other thing. He's an attack dog with a smile. When he attacks you, he does it in a way that seems almost playful if you're not really keyed in and clued in on what he's doing. So I think in that way, he's a very smart pick here, like David said, because he can go on the attack, and he can do it. I think I called him the happy attack dog, you know. And so I think that's the big advantage for him. And again, don't mistake the fact that I think just Kamala Harris likes him a lot personally.
To be clear, what I said was he's the right pick. I don't know if he's the smart pick. I guess we'll find out on Wednesday morning, November, if he's the smart pick. I do think he is the right pick for Kamala Harris. I think that's the one she had to go with. There's a couple of things to think about. I've been talking to Democrat strategists all day long. There are a couple of top ones that I can't name, sadly, but trust me, you would know their names. One said this to me about the pick. I just want to read it to you. This person texted me about an hour ago. Smart pick. This helps hold Biden's white base. In other words, what he explains is, because this pick speaks to that. Younger voters like the guy. That is rare. He can appeal to white seniors, white suburban voters, and white college-educated voters. He does, for her, the same thing Biden did for Obama. That's coming from a well-known Democrat source. And once again, you'd all recognize his name. The reason I tell you that is because there's importance behind those comments. That's not just kind of like this generic Democrat person out there. Yeah. So that's kind of the thinking, guys.
It is super interesting. And if you're just joining us now, Dan Andros here, joined by CBN's David Brody and John Stolness. We're waiting. Kamala Harris is about to speak here in Philadelphia. That is Governor Josh Shapiro speaking right now. And though I haven't heard what he said, I mean, he's been up there for a while now. Maybe he's the concern was that, hey, he's going to upstage Kamala Harris. And that's, you know, what some people were speculating, maybe one reason why they didn't want to go with him, because he's pretty dynamic speaker and all the rest. So he's been up there speaking now, and Kamala Harris is expected to speak and officially introduce Governor Walz as her official vice presidential nominee. So that's where we are at right now. And we're kind of, as we're waiting here for that to happen, we're talking about the nuts and bolts of this pick. And I want to talk, guys, shift gears a little bit here while we're waiting for this announcement. I mean, it's been a couple weeks now since we've essentially known that Kamala Harris is going to be the next nominee after Biden stepped aside. And she really hasn't done a lot other than sort of planned stuff. So is this going to change anytime soon? Or J.D. Vance, I think, called it a basement campaign, as, you know, obviously speaking of it derogatory. Is this quote unquote basement campaign going to continue, or are we going to see a shift in that eventually?
I mean, it'll shift when they need it to shift. I mean, I think there will be calls for her to do more interviews or do an interview. She hasn't done one yet, which hasn't sat down with anyone, but that's inevitable. That will happen at some point. The question is when will she hold a press conference? She has a lot of energy around her right now. Obviously, she had an event in Atlanta that was exceedingly well attended. There's a lot of excitement around the Democratic Party right now, and it's understandable. This, of course, is yet another bump to that. But at some point, she is going to have to sit down, and she is going to have to do an interview with someone. How pressing will that interview be? How hard will she get questioned on different things? It's hard to say at this point, but depends who the interview is with, whether it'll be kind of a cupcake interview or a hard-hitting interview. But that's got to happen. She's got to have a press conference at some point. So I don't think the basement campaign can continue for forever, but this is also a truncated campaign. She doesn't have to spend a year trying to curry voters here. She didn't have to run to the left any further to the left during a primary campaign. She was able to kind of jump right in here in the general election. So I think those are advantages for her. That's allowed her to kind of have this this runway where she hasn't really been challenged by anyone in the press. And so I think that after the DNC, after the convention is over, once that finishes, I think then you're gonna have to see her sit down. But she may not need to do that until then.
Yeah. David?
I think it's I agree, John. I think it's a minimalist approach. Do the bare minimum that she needs to do to kind of just, coast in and just kind of glide in as much as she can. But John, I thought you made a really good point, which is she'll do this when she needs to do this. And that's very important because, if she's forced to do it, then she'll have to. But at this point, there's no reason for her to do it. I mean, should she do it? Of course she should do it. But look, I think she's trying to, run the clock out to a degree. And what I mean by that is, her in an interview setting, it could be very, very dangerous for the campaign. She's got word salad disease. And that's, that's just look at the videotapes. And they're everywhere. And they're not taken out of context. Unlike what we were told about Joe Biden, when we showed video of him all the time. And people are like, oh, stop it. No, it was true then. And it's true now. It's the same thing with Kamala Harris. So a couple of things. Josh Shapiro, who's on stage now, I want to just address this real quick, why he wasn't picked. There's a lot of talk. I've heard a lot of talk about he wasn't picked because he's Jewish. Hold on for a second. Let's just address the elephant in the room here for a second. By the way, I grew up Jewish, so I know a thing or two about the Jews, as we like to say. All right. It wasn't because he was Jewish. It was because of his position on Israel and specifically on the anti-Semitic protesters at college campuses. He was forceful against those protesters. He's been very critical of Netanyahu, kind of where the Democrat Party stands, but he hasn't been, fully engaged as, the old Gaza genocide line. So he hasn't done that. So it's because of his views, not because he's Jewish. And here's how I can prove it. Look at Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is Jewish. But the far left, the anti-Semitic, and that's what they are, let's be clear, the far left anti-Semitic in the Democrat Party love Bernie Sanders, and he's Jewish. It has nothing to do with being Jewish. It has to do with being on their side, and Bernie's all in, and Josh Shapiro wasn't fully all in, and that was a big difference in all of this.
Yeah.
And I'll say the other thing too with Shapiro, that there were some issues in Pennsylvania. There's a couple of scandals in Pennsylvania in his time as governor that were getting some play. And I think I don't think they were anything that would. I mean, certainly I don't think it was anything that hurt him too much in the vetting process. But they're out there, and if you're looking to select a running mate, the overall idea is to do no harm to your campaign. I think you heard that a number of times today. If you're watching television, do no harm. Josh Shapiro probably wins you Pennsylvania, maybe wins you Pennsylvania. Good chance he wins you Pennsylvania. Certainly helps you there. But there were some of these other things that came along with Josh Shapiro, including the worry that she would upstage him. And Tim Walz does you no harm. And I think that was the big difference between these two guys as well, as she felt very comfortable with him doing no harm to her or her campaign.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and there you see the live stage here in Philadelphia. We're just waiting for Vice President Kamala Harris to go ahead and make this announcement official of her VP pick here of Governor Tim Walz there of Minnesota. And, we're talking about, we mentioned the strategy there, that the basement campaign that we touched on for a second there, and you said she's going to go when she has to. It's interesting because it's almost kind of like how Trump was in the primary with the debates. He didn't have to do it, right? And so some people are, hey, we want him to debate, and he's like, well, why? I've got this massive lead. It's not going to do anything for me other than potentially hurt me. So why not just stay on top? And so I think Vice President Harris is sort of in a similar situation. If she's getting favorable-ish coverage, all right, and they're not going after her, and it's kind of this kumbaya vibe, the honeymoon vibe that we were talking about. Like John said, I mean, she's going to have to come out eventually, but I'm thinking about these debates is kind of where I was leading to, but I want to hear your reaction to that, David.
Well, I don't think I would compare it to the debates. I mean, honestly, Dan, I mean, here's the thing. I mean, Trump was way ahead. All the other candidates were at 1%, 2%. Even Nikki Haley eventually got to somewhere. So, I mean, that's different than this. And this is a presidential election that, the voters need to hear from the final two candidates. And they need to hear not just in a debate setting, but in as many settings as possible. So I'm not sure if I would go apples to apples on that, but I understand what you're saying. There is kind of a political, calculus to all of this for sure.
Yeah.
But, it's going to be interesting to watch to see if it's Kamala that comes out on stage or if it's Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. And by the way, I mean, not to make a big deal about this, but people need to get her name right. I mean, it's Kamala. It's Kamala Harris. Now, John, you laughed. I'm curious why you laughed, and I'm smiling too. I mean, I'm not trying to cause any controversy here, but I have noticed that people, listen, I don't want to put any motive behind what people are saying or doing, but listen, we're not that stupid. I mean, we might be stupid on certain days, but we're not that stupid. Her name is Kamala. What's so hard about Kamala? Why are we calling her Kamala and Kamala and all of that? I mean, is that? I mean, maybe we need to address that a little bit. Why are people, smart people, doing that? Are they being lazy? Do they not understand? Or is it something more nefarious than that? I'm just putting it out there, guys. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no,
I got to put it out there.
Go ahead, because look, I'm going to raise my hand. I'm guilty, and it's nothing more than just a tick. I just can't. There's no intention. It's just when I look at it, sometimes it's the way I say it, and so it's like I have to make an effort to say it the quote unquote correct way, but.
There are a lot of people that are like that. I get it. There's no bad intentions behind it, but I wonder if some other people are on purpose, especially in the Trump campaign. Kamala, and though if you mispronounce her name, what's the point of that? What are you trying to say? And what's the message? I don't get it. Help me out. Someone educate me.
No. So are you saying? I just want to clarify what you're getting at here. So you're saying you think it's a bad tactic to sort of jokingly like mock the name? Is that sort of what you're saying?
Yeah, it's kind of like Barack Hussein Obama.
Yeah.
It's that same thing. I mean, we know the implication there. That was obvious. This one, I'm not quite sure how obvious it is in terms of why they're doing that exactly, other than to belittle her. But like, what's the point of that? I mean, that's kind of stupid, juvenile. I don't know.
The reason I think I laughed there, David, because I've been wondering that same thing in my head for the last few weeks, and it does take. I mean, she's been out of the spotlight for a little while here, so I think maybe we didn't remember from 4 years ago. But it is incredibly disrespectful to knowingly call her by the wrong with the wrong pronunciation or whatever. Be like purposefully mispronouncing Donald Trump, or it's right. It's that dumb. I mean, so if it is doing it on purpose to try and belittle her, let's be grown-ups in the room. I couldn't agree more. And the reason why I was laughing is because I had that same thought the other day. Like, imagine if we all called Donald Trump and put the emphasis on the second part of his name. How ridiculous would that sound? It's the same thing. She's got a name. So let's all agree to say it the right way. And if we slip up once in a while, it's not not on purpose. The
thing is, it's not that hard. I mean, it's comma. Not. Is that a period? It's not an exclamation point. It's a comma. Comma la. Do re mi fa sol la ti do. I mean, come on, Kamala.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's just kind of bothered me. It's just bothered me.
I mean, if you're trying to do it as an attack, it's ridiculous. I mean, it's utterly silly, and it's almost as ridiculous as the weird thing. Which, by the way, that was Governor Tim Walz who coined this.
Baby.
Did him coming up with the weird viral thing end up? You know what? I really like that.
It could
guy.
have, Dan. But that was smart, and it was just kind of a natural. And he's been calling them weird. I think, David, you said this when we did the campaign catch-up. He's been using that phrase for the last 2 or 3 years. He just hasn't been on the main stage. But since he's
Yeah, no, you're right. And here's the thing. It would be a funny line if he came out tonight and said, I can't believe I'm standing here. This is so weird. I think that would be a funny line, because if you think about it, as you mentioned at the top here, he did kind of come out of nowhere here. So it is kind of weird that he kind of survived to the end. He won Survivor. He didn't win $1 million, but he might win the presidency with Kamala Harris.
Yeah, the whole the weird thing, I kind of didn't really get why it gained traction in the first place. I guess I have overestimated the nature of social media and everything. The most ridiculous things always seem to gain traction. But I will say, like, I saw JD Vance respond to that the other day, and I feel like the weird thing is an open door for Republicans to just go back at all of the, I think the things JD Vance pointed out were, well, what's weird is, putting pornographic books in schools, and, things like this. And it's like,
Yeah.
it just opens the door for them to run off a litany of things.
Yeah. And I think the weird comment is, well, I mean, if you kind of look at the TikTok on this, no pun intended, I guess, in a way, but if you look at the TikTok on it, the Democrats started coming up with this, Tim Walz and others. And then all of a sudden, if you noticed on Morning Joe and some of the other morning shows and afternoon shows, right away, they love it. They also started I'm sorry?
I was just saying they all loved it.
Well, they loved it. And here's what happened. They didn't just go with that narrative in terms of asking people about it, though they did that. But they started their intros. If you look at their intros, I'm kind of a bit of a student of journalism as well. And I look at how they intro segments, and they use the weird portion as well. I'm sorry, I can't see who we're seeing because I'm old and I don't have good eyesight. But did anybody walk on stage?
Guys,
someone's walking out, but I think we got a false alarm there. It looks like some security guys.
To me, it looks like a runway show, in Milan. I don't know. I can't see where.
I think the weird thing is interesting because it's been really hard, I think, for Democrats to find a simple, I don't know if insult is the right word, but maybe, because, we've seen Donald Trump loves to throw insults at people, and it's very effective. The nicknames that he comes up with for people, they stick, and it definitely brands them a certain way. It definitely makes you think about them in a certain way. And I think Marco Rubio in 2016 tried to do that with Trump. And it sounded too planned and staged, like it came off as totally unauthentic. Tim Walz coming out with this, I don't really think he planned it. I don't really think he believes they're weird and kind of said it. And for whatever reason, it connected. It was a rare moment where Democrats were able to, it was something so easy. That's the other thing too. It's easy. It's easy to call someone and the things that they do weird. And let's face it, you go to any political rally, whether it's a Trump rally, a Harris rally, a Biden rally, there are weird people there dressed weirdly, doing weird things, because people who are obsessed with politics, generally speaking, are all in, and they're different from regular folks. And so it's pretty easy. Politicians are the most politically minded people in the world, obviously, because it's their life. So it's going to seem a little weird to people too. So you're right. It can go both ways, but it was the first line of attack by Democrats, I think, on Donald Trump that really landed in a personal way. And it really bothered Donald Trump and the Trump campaign too. That's the other thing. You can tell they were bothered by it and they didn't know how to react to it. And that's what kept it feeding for the last few days, going on a week and a half now.
Yeah. You wonder why it bothered them so much, because honestly, it's kind of weird that the weird narrative took off. I mean, that's kind of a weird word, weird, right? I mean, in other words, what does it even mean? I mean, I think it means a lot of things to a lot of different people. And the fact that you have such a broad definition of weird, and it can be interpreted different ways, I'm surprised it stuck. It stuck.
All right, well, we're going to pause for a minute here as, well, she's probably not going to speak just yet, but there's Kamala Harris with Governor Tim Walz heading out. She's going to introduce him soon here. So when they get up to the podium there, we'll take a listen to their remarks for a few moments and see what they have to say. Now, guys, as they're making their way up to the stage here, I'm interested to hear what you guys want people to listen for, because these are the moments here where you'll find out a lot about what we're going to see in the coming days ahead, on what they think is important to focus on, where they think their attack angles are, etc. So as they're walking up here before they speak, what should we be looking for?
Well, a couple of things. You're going to hear a lot about working class voters, working class folks across this country. You're going to hear about his story, that he grew up on a farm, that he was a school teacher for 20 years, and he was a football coach. I think you're going to hear about how he's just a regular guy, and they're going to paint a picture of him as a guy that cares about the little guy. I think that's what you're going to.
Yeah, here she goes.
Philadelphia. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Good evening. Oh, it is good to be back in Pennsylvania. So let me say, on behalf of myself and the first, second gentleman of the United States, my husband, Doug Emhoff, thank you for the warm welcome. And let me just say, it's good to be here with all of the friends, all of the leaders who are here. I want to thank former Governor Ed Rendell, Senator Bob Casey, who we will re-elect this November, Senator John Fetterman, Mayor Sherelle Parker, and Chairman Jamie Harrison. And it is so good to be here with your incredible Governor, Josh Shapiro. And I will say, Josh is a dear, dear friend and an extraordinary leader. He and I have been spending a lot of time together over the years. And I told Josh, look, I am so invested in our friendship in doing this together, because together with Josh Shapiro, we will win Pennsylvania. We will win Pennsylvania. And I thank you, Josh. I thank you. So Philadelphia, I launched my campaign for the President of the United States a mere 2 weeks ago. And it's been a bit of a whirlwind. And just last night, the delegates to the Democratic National Convention finished voting. And so I stand before you today to proudly announce I am now officially the Democratic nominee for President of the United States. And so now we got some work to do. We need to move to the general election and win that. And to all the friends, listen, we also need to level set. We are the underdogs in this race. But we have the momentum, and I know exactly what we are up against. Now, many of you know, before I was elected vice president or elected a United States senator, I was an elected attorney general, and before that, elected district attorney. And before that, I was a courtroom prosecutor. So in those roles, I took on perpetrators of all kinds. Predators who abused women. Fraudsters who scammed consumers. Cheaters who broke the rules for their own gain. So hear me when I say, Trump's type. So, but let me say, hold on. This campaign, our campaign, is not just a fight against Donald Trump. Our campaign, this campaign, is a fight for the future. It's a fight for the future. In Pennsylvania, we fight for a future with affordable housing, affordable health care, affordable child care, paid leave. We fight for a future where we build a broad-based economy, where every American has the opportunity to own a home, to start a business, and to build wealth. We fight for a future where we bring down prices that are still too high and lower the cost of living for America's families, so that they have a chance not just to get by, but to get ahead. We fight for a future where we defend our most fundamental freedoms: the freedom to vote, the freedom to be safe from gun violence, the freedom to love who you love openly and with pride, and the freedom of a woman to make decisions about her own body, not having her government tell her what to do. So, I love you too. So here's the thing. Since the day that I announced my candidacy, I set out to find a partner who can help build this brighter future. A leader who will help unite our nation and move us forward. A fighter for the middle class. A patriot who believes, as I do, in the extraordinary promise of America. A promise of freedom, opportunity, and justice, not just for some, but for all. So, Pennsylvania, I'm here today because I found such a leader. Governor Tim Walz of the great state of Minnesota. So, to those who know him best, Tim is more than a governor. To his wife, Gwen, he is a husband. To his kids, Hope and Gus, he is a dad. To his fellow veterans, he is Sergeant Major Walz. To the people of southern Minnesota, for 12 years, he was congressman. To his former high school students, he was Mr. Walz. to his former high school football players, he was coach. Coach. And in 91 days, the nation will know Coach Waltz by another name, Vice President of the United States. So America, for some folks, they're just getting to know Coach Waltz's story. And I'll tell you, he is the proud product of a middle-class family in rural Nebraska. He is a veteran who served our nation in uniform for more than 2 decades as a member of the Army National Guard, and he went to college on the GI Bill. He is someone who, long before he entered politics, worked as a teacher. When Coach Waltz and his wife Gwen moved from his native Nebraska to Minnesota nearly 30 years ago, they both took jobs at the local high school. Coach Waltz taught social studies, Gwen taught English. After school, Tim was the linebackers coach for the football team. Where I've heard the stories about he had a knack for using the game of football to teach life lessons. He saw the potential in kids who sometimes didn't even see it in themselves. Under those Friday night lights, Coach Waltz motivated his players to believe they could achieve anything. And together, they defied the odds, hear this out, going from a winless record to the school's first ever state championship. And I'll say and I'll add, Tim wasn't only a role model on the football field. Around that same time, Coach Waltz was approached by a student in his social studies class. The young man was one of the first openly gay students at the school and was hoping to start a gay-straight alliance. At a time when acceptance was difficult to find for LGBTQ students, Tim knew the signal that it would send to have a football coach get involved. So he signed up to be the group's faculty advisor. And as students have said, he made the school a safe place for everybody. In the high school yearbook, the students voted Coach Waltz the, quote, most inspiring faculty member. And as I think everyone here can see, Tim Waltz was the kind of teacher and mentor that every child in America dreams of having, and that every kid deserves. The kind of coach, because he's the kind of person who makes people feel like they belong and then inspires them to dream big. And that's the kind of vice president he will be. And that's the kind of vice president America deserves. So it was Coach Walz's students who actually helped him decide to run for office. And he served 12 years in Congress, representing a purple district as he reached across the aisle to get things done. He was the highest ranking enlisted man to ever serve in the United States Congress. And the top Democrat on the Veterans Committee. And he was known as one of Capitol Hill's best marksmen, winning a bipartisan sharpshooting contest year after year. In Washington, Tim worked to raise the minimum wage, to protect the freedom of workers to join a union, and he cast one of the critical votes to pass the Affordable Care Act. Which, of course, gave health insurance to tens of millions of Americans. I'm going to tell you, when we win, Tim and I will continue to make the Affordable Care Act even stronger. We will win. Now, let's talk about what we're dealing with on the other side. So on that last topic, if Donald Trump gets the chance, he will end the Affordable Care Act and take us back to a time when insurance companies had the power to deny people with pre-existing conditions. You remember what that was like? Children with asthma, breast cancer survivors, grandparents with diabetes. Well, Governor Walz and I will not let that happen. Because we believe health care should be a right and not just a privilege for those who can afford it. As governor, Tim has continued to fight for working families. He secured paid leave for workers in Minnesota. And he refused, as governor, to allow any student in their public schools to go hungry. So he made school breakfast and lunch free for every child. And Tim Walz and I, we agree about many things, including when our middle class is strong, America is strong. And strengthening the middle class will be my defining goal as I am President of the United States. So Pennsylvania, ours is a fight for the future of the middle class, and it is a fight for freedom. In this moment,
well, if you're just joining us, we are listening to Vice President Kamala Harris here introducing her new vice presidential nominee pick, Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota, and she's been going on now for a while. We were trying to wait here to see when he chimes in to see what he says. And gentlemen, so far, what do you make of kind of the lines we've seen? Any indication of what we're going to see going forward as far as the narratives, or what'd you pick up?
Well, let me just say this. I've been very impressed with Kamala Harris during this speech. She seems to have composure. She seems to be in the moment. She's playing off the crowd very well. It's not awkward at all. Okay, this just in, she's on prompter. So we wait to see what happens when the prompter goes away and all of a sudden some tough person out there asks her a tough question, which who knows if it's going to come. But the point is, in this moment, with prompter and with a boisterous crowd, and boy, it is a boisterous crowd, I think she's doing very well. And if you're the Trump campaign and you see this, here's a news flash for you. This ain't Joe Biden. And not only is it not Joe Biden, but this is Prosecutor Harris on stage. Now, we can talk about all of her flaws some other time when she has one. And believe me, she'll have one before November for sure, if not a few. But tonight, I think she's doing a great job. And just a quick couple other observations. I mean, how many times do we hear Coach Walz? How many times do we hear teacher, Professor Tim, Professor Walz? So, I mean, clearly, as I said, kind of as to the lead up to this, I had a sense that we were going to hear a lot of like who he is and what just a great Midwestern type guy he is. He even won a sharpshooting contest. It's like that type of stuff. But of course, the policy is there, at least from a liberal perspective, because he's off the reservation when it comes to the liberal policy stuff. Well, he's on their reservation, I should say. A couple other things. I thought that the most important thing, or at least one of the most interesting parts, is did you notice that at the beginning when she was talking about Donald Trump, and then I don't know if you heard what the crowd was shouting, but the crowd was shouting, "Lock him up, lock him up." And she said, "Hold on." She got serious. She said, "Stop, wait." She didn't actually say stop. She said, hold on. She said, "No, this campaign is about," and then she went on to say, quote, "The campaign is a fight for the future, not just about Donald Trump." I thought that was important. I think it kind of showed that she was rising above better angel strategy. And in that moment, that's an impromptu moment. Kudos to her for that. Anyhow, there's a lot more to say, but John, please. I get paid per minute, so that's why I like to go long. I actually get paid per word, so I'm making a lot of money tonight.
Where do I get that deal? That's a good deal, Dave.
That is a good
deal. I'll get to my agent.
That's right.
John, before you hop in here, I was just going to note that you said, David, this ain't Biden. And the crowd is noticeably different. I mean, I just, we've talked about the energy and how them swapping out the candidates here has rejuvenated the Democratic Party. I mean, I just don't think there's any denying this. I mean, the energy feels more similar to that of what you would typically see at a Trump campaign.
No, I think that's right. And I think you're seeing why there's no rush for her to do interviews right now, because the crowd is eating this up, and she looks very comfortable. And I think the word that I would use to describe her is confident. I don't think 4 years ago when she was running in the primary, I don't think she was confident. I think she has an air of confidence. Her campaign has an air of confidence about it. I think they've hit pretty much every right note over these last 2 weeks when she ascended to the top of the ticket. And you're seeing it here in this speech. She's in her element. David's right. Her pacing is excellent. It sounds like she's speaking off the cuff. Like her oratory skills in this speech are outstanding. And she's really doing a great job kind of putting Governor Walz as, great Uncle Tim, that's kind of the vibe you want to get, like your teddy bear, great Uncle Tim. He's the guy you go to when you've got a real tough problem. You know, he's the guy you go to when you need support. He's going to be the nation's great uncle. You know, he's going to be our country's guy that you go to when you need a pat on the back and some advice and someone to kind of help see this country through whatever it is that we're going through. And I think you hit on it, David, when she was talking about getting the crowd to settle down. The Biden campaign, and it's a lot of the same campaign folks who are running the Biden campaign now running the Harris campaign. It's amazing the switch that they've done. Biden's messaging was Trump is a danger to democracy. We have to fight for democracy because Trump is going to destroy democracy. The Harris campaign's message is freedom. It's about opportunity. It's a very much a positive, forward-looking message that we're seeing her say tonight. She hasn't really hammered Trump very much or the Republican Party very much. A second ago, talking about Trump wanting to take away the Affordable Care Act, and certainly those are going to be notes that we hear throughout the campaign. But I think there's been a concerted effort to try and ride this wave of enthusiasm in a direction that was different than the direction the Biden campaign was running it before.
You know, that's an interesting observation, John. And I kind of noticed that as well when she made that comment about this is something bigger, because it reminded me of what Obama tapped into with the hope and change. And, you know, Republicans, and they, you know, kind of joked about that and like, hope it change. But I think it was a message that sort of resonated with a lot of people, and especially those people in the middle. And it kind of, it was like a feel good message. And I think it's important to have a vision. Yeah, you're going to criticize your opponents, but you've got to have something forward looking to. And I think the Trump campaign would be wise to see, okay, we can point out the flaws over here, but we just can't be just saying all the negative things and the gloom and doom. We also have to have a positive vision here going forward.
Well, you know, all Biden did in the lead up before Kamala took over was threat to democracy. Trump's a threat to democracy. The threat to democracy. You know what? Guess what? It didn't work. The poll numbers didn't change. As a matter of fact, they went up for Trump for other reasons as well. But the point is that it wasn't. You got a sense with Biden, it was always like, look, at least I'm not Trump. Vote for me. This is a marked shift, and that's important. Let me just say something, because maybe our viewers out there, some of them who are pro-Trump or pro-conservative, whatever you want to call it, they might be thinking, who's buying this stuff? You know, you got to be kidding me. That these are two of the most liberal. She was voted the most liberal senator when she was a senator. And he, as we've detailed here tonight and will continue to detail, he's literally... he wants free health care for illegals. He has signed a bill into law talking about, giving illegals driver's license. When asked about a border wall of 25 feet that Donald Trump wants to build, he said, I want to build a ladder that's 30 feet so they can all come in. Look, and that's just immigration. On abortion, he is really liberal. Late-term abortion, the Born Alive Infant Protection Act that we've talked about, those are going to become major issues down the road. Having said all of that, I think what's important here is there's a political science professor at Emory University and his name is Drew Weston. He wrote an amazing book. It sticks with me to this day. It's called The Politics of Emoting. And he basically says people vote with their hearts, not with their brains. People insulting at first, and obviously people are using their brains to a degree. But there is something to be said about a connection and about emotion and about how you make the presentation. And I think we're seeing that here tonight. Now, I want to be very clear to everybody in the chat who might be, taking sedatives as we speak, who would be like, you've got to be kidding me. You're not buying this. Hey, I'm not saying I'm buying it. Yes or no, I'm not saying I'm simply pointing out the fact that this is something the Trump campaign needs to be concerned about. We've heard the other side. You can't put lipstick on a pig. Well, maybe you can. Maybe you can. And we might be in the process right now of a pig getting lipstick. And tonight, it's looking pretty good. The pig's looking pretty good tonight.
Well,
so,
yeah. No,
so yeah, that's really that's it. I just want to make that point.
No, I think it's a really good point because, I've seen kind of the meme out there when after the debate, when, Joe Biden had that disastrous debate, we saw the press collectively zone in on that thing like we've never seen before. I mean, they were like, whoa, what just happened here? Mm-hmm. And so a lot of people on the Republican side that often, criticize the press for being kind of liberal leaning, said, well, it was nice to have a press corps for a couple weeks.
Right.
Well, you don't. I mean, I think if you're the Trump campaign, you have to realize, okay, that they were doing the work for you there at that time for those few weeks. And well, look what happened. They got a different candidate in there. Essentially, they kind of pushed that along. And so now you can't expect that press corps to be coming back anytime soon. Definitely, not likely before November for that to happen. So you have to take these threats seriously. If you're, when I say threat, I'm saying politically, from a Republican perspective, from a Trump team perspective, you have to look at this and say these are legitimate concerns for us now. The facts on the ground have changed, and we have to honestly look at what is resonating on their side and see how we can counter that. And I think it's a mistake if they don't.
Yeah, and it looks like Governor Walz is stepping to the podium now. I'll just say that I think that the Trump campaign needs to start putting together a positive message here to kind of match what the Harris campaign is doing, or else they're in danger of losing some voters along the way. But that's enough.
Yeah, here's Governor Walz. Let's see what he has to say for a few minutes.
Thank you. Wow. Thank you, Philadelphia. Thank you, Madam Vice President, for the trust you put in me, but maybe more so, thank you for bringing back the joy. I'm thrilled to be on this journey with you and Doug, this incredible journey. And Pennsylvania, I know you know this, but my God, what a treasure you have in Josh Shapiro. Holy hell, can this guy bring the fire? He can bring the fire. This is a visionary leader. Also, I have to tell you, everybody in America knows when you need a bridge fixed, call that guy. And I think sometimes we forget, and you see people a little one-dimensional, but seeing a guy who cares so deeply about his family, a man with compassion, vision, and I'll have to tell you this, I know this from experience, there is no one you would rather go to a Springsteen concert in Jersey with than him, than that guy. Bruce! And I can't wait for all of you and America to get to know my incredible wife, Gwen, a 29-year public school educator. Don't ever underestimate teachers. And our two beautiful kids, Hope and Gus. I couldn't be prouder to be on this ticket and to help Vice President Harris become what we all know is very, very good for us to think about. Next President of the United States of America. From her first day as a prosecutor, as a district attorney, Attorney General of the great state of California, a United States Senator, and Vice President of the United States. Vice President Harris has fought on the side of the American people. She took on the predators, she took on the fraudsters, she took down the transnational gangs, she stood up against powerful corporate interests, and she never hesitated to reach across the aisle if it meant improving people's lives. And I want all of you to hold this and don't ever underestimate the power of this. She does it all with a sense of joy. I know a little something about that commitment to people. I was born in West Point, Nebraska. I lived in Butte, a small town of 400, where community was a way of life. Growing up, I spent the summers working on the family farm. My mom and dad taught us, show generosity towards your neighbors and work for a common good. My dad served in the Army during the Korean War, and with his encouragement, at 17, I joined the Army National Guard. For 24 years, I proudly wore the uniform of this nation. The National Guard gave me purpose. It gave me the strength of a shared commitment to something greater than ourselves. And just as it did for my dad and millions of others, the GI Bill gave me a shot at a college education. My dad was a teacher. My brothers and sisters and I followed in their footsteps. 3 out of 4 of us married teachers. It's what we do. For nearly 20 years, I had the privilege of teaching high school social studies and coaching football. Including winning that state championship. So thank you. Don't ever close the yearbook. Don't ever. But it was my students. They encouraged me to run for office. They saw in me what I was hoping to instill in them, a commitment of common good, a belief that one person can make a difference. So in 2006, I took a leap and I ran for Congress. And because high school teachers are super optimistic, I was running in a district that had 1 Democrat since 1892. Well, my neighbors graced me with an opportunity to represent them in the United States House of Representatives. I'm proud of the work we did there together. I worked across the aisle on veterans issues, on agriculture, and on ways to grow rural economies. I learned the art of compromise without compromising my values. And now, as governor of the great state of Minnesota, I bring those experiences to bear in tackling the challenges that are facing our great state. Minnesota's strength comes from our values, our commitment to working together, to seeing past our differences, to always being willing to lend a helping hand. Those are the same values I learned on the family farm and tried to instill in my students. I took it to Congress and to the state capitol, and now Vice President Harris and I are running to take those very values to the White House. Now, Donald Trump sees the world a little differently than us. First of all, he doesn't know the first thing about service. He doesn't have time for it because he's too busy serving himself. Again and again and again, Trump weakens our economy to strengthen his own hand. He mocks our laws. He sows chaos and division. And that's to say nothing of his record as president. He froze in the face of the COVID crisis. He drove our economy into the ground. And make no mistake, violent crime was up under Donald Trump. That's not even counting the crimes he committed. You know, some of us are. Some of us in here are old enough to remember. I see you down there. I see those old white guys. Some of us are old enough to remember when it was Republicans who were talking about freedom. It turns out now what they meant was the government should be free to invade your doctor's office. In Minnesota, we respect our neighbors and their personal choices that they make. Even if we wouldn't make the same choice for ourselves, there's a golden rule. Mind your own damn business. These guys are after my heart chanting, mind your own damn business. That feels good, so thank you. Look, that includes IVF, and this gets personal for me and my family. When my wife and I decided to have children, we spent years going through infertility treatments. And I remember praying every night for a call for good news. The pit in my stomach when the phone rang, and the agony when we heard that the treatments hadn't worked. So it wasn't by chance that when we welcomed our daughter into the world, we named her Hope. When Vice President and I talk about freedom, we mean the freedom to make your own health care decisions. And for our children to be free to go to school without worrying they'll be shot dead in their classrooms.
This is live
By the way,
footage
as you
here
heard, I was
of
one of the
a
best shots in
campaign
Congress.
rally for Vice President Kamala Harris, who's introducing her VP pick here officially, Governor Tim Walz from Minnesota. And so this is being the first official announcement. We're bringing that to you live here, and we are responding here with our analysis. CBN's David Brody and John Stolnis are with me here. So that's kind of our first look on a national stage here of who Kamala Harris has picked. And so what are some of your first reactions here to seeing him on the stage here, David?
Can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Normally my family puts me on mute. That's typically how it works. It's exactly what I thought it would be from Tim Walz, which is folksy, kind of the regular guy vibe. That's who he is in terms of the style. So that's what we saw for sure. One thing that stood out, so there was nothing surprising there. And he's going to be, here's what we're finding out. And this is pretty traditional. He's going to be the attack dog. He's the one that's going to go after Trump. We just started hearing that as we came back here to do some analysis. And Kamala Harris is going to be the better angels, the brighter, kind of the visionary. They've clearly decided this is the way to go. And honestly, they're not breaking any new ground. That's typically the way it has been. But I think it's a juxtaposition as to how Biden was handling it. And Kamala was kind of being dragged along, if you will, with Biden in terms of the threat to democracy stuff. So this is a whole new vibe, a whole new world, as Aladdin would say. And so you've got that. Now, one last thing I just want to point out, a couple of lines. By the way, did you notice he mentioned Springsteen and a concert in Jersey? I mean, this is what I'm talking about, right? I mean, you're going to get a lot of Tim Walz like that. But here's what he said. 2 times he mentioned the word joy, and I'm sure we'll hear it a lot more. But he said, quote, "Thank you for bringing back the joy," is what he said. Of course, Republicans may translate that and say, hey, thanks for saving us here a little bit because Biden was a disaster and we were having a problem. That might be the translation. But the point is, thank you for bringing back the joy. And then he went on to say she does this all with a sense of joy. We heard the word joy twice. That was notable to me. I think if we had stayed with the speech, My guess is you'll hear it 2 or 3 more times, and you'll hear it throughout the campaign. Why is that exactly? Because I think, as we talked about, they want an optimistic narrative. But beyond all of that, I think to a degree, the cackling Kamala stuff, the laugh, you know, that I think this is a way for them to say, you know what, without saying, stop getting on her case because she laughs weird, or, you know, and they're not going to ever say that. But if they just say she's a joyful candidate, well, then all of a sudden the laugh might not be so bad. She's just a happy-go-lucky warrior who wants to drive America into socialism. Just kidding. Sorry, I ad-libbed that last part. But you know what I'm trying to say. I mean, this is where I think they're going with it. And once again, I'm getting rich tonight because I'm speaking a lot word by word. John, I'll send you my agent. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Thank you. No, I think we're seeing the hope and change playbook from Biden, Obama Biden back in 2016, and she's trying to put herself in the position of being the hope agent and the change agent, really, because this is it's unusual that you would have a president and a vice president where the vice president is running for president, taking over from the incumbent, and that person would appear to be the change agent, as opposed to the other party who has a candidate who hasn't been in office the last 4 or 8 years or whatever it is. But because the Republicans have Donald Trump, who was a president before, you kind of know and get a sense of what another Trump administration would be like, good or bad, like it or not. I think there's a sense of what we know Donald Trump would do. We've seen his campaign speeches have kind of become the same thing. And there hasn't been anything really new with Trump or what he'll do in office. And here comes Kamala Harris, even though she's been in office the last 4 years in the White House. It is such a 180 from what Joe Biden, how the message that he was presenting on the campaign trail and what the message that she's saying that she wants for the next 4 years, that I think she is coming across as the change agent to a lot of people. And so that's where you're getting this hope and change type dynamic with the campaign. And she's going to be that candidate. She is clearly trying to emulate the Barack Obama model of 2008 when he was running against John McCain the first time. And Tim Walz here is going to be the Joe Biden. He, like David said, he's going to be the attack dog. He's going to do it with a smile, like you've seen. He's attacking Donald Trump, but he's adding a little wit to it, but not in an insulting way, not in a demeaning, lowbrow way. You know, there's going to have to be a change by the Trump administration if they want to cut into this duo here a little bit, because it's such a different dynamic than what they had planned for over the course of this last year when it was Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. So it's very, very interesting.
It is interesting, and I think that's where we should go right here and talk about is what does the Trump campaign do next? Because while they can have and she can tap into the hope and change playbook, I mean, the reality is that Kamala Harris has been the vice president over the last 4 years, and there are a lot of massive issues that people are dealing with right now, namely inflation and the prices and the things we mention all the time. And so the Trump campaign, I think, guys, and I'd love to hear your response to this, has really got to tap into that, and we'll see, I guess, how much that really is resonating with the American people, these economic struggles and whatnot. Come November. But I think as far as messaging goes, that would be one obvious choice of where they have to reshift this focus to, and then put forward and say, hey, look how we had it done when we were in office, and we had it at this price and you had it at this price, all the details. So what's your reaction to that? Well,
I think they really only have one play, and it's what they've been kind of doing, though they get off message at times, but they call her dangerously liberal. I'm not saying that's working right now, but what I am saying is that their only play is to basically paint this ticket as the most liberal ticket in U.S. political history. That's all they can do. That's all they can do. And you just have to, if you're the Trump campaign, you have to hope that people actually do their due diligence and see this for what it is, which is what they will say. The Trump campaign will say this is a bunch of masquerading hoo-ha. That this is just smoke and mirrors. I mean, think of it this way. I always used to say the cake was baked when Biden was, running, like it's over. The cake was baked. Well, the cake here is still the same. I mean, the cake has, it's still not a great cake, immigration, the economy, and go on with the cake. But the icing has changed. It's not green and moldy. It's vanilla. And so now the question becomes, is the cake a bit more presentable? It is. Does it taste just as good? No. But is it palatable enough? Maybe. So I think that's kind of where we're at. We're basically at me describing cakes. No, but I mean, that's my sense of it, guys. And I got a email, or yeah, actually it was an email from a Democrat strategist. This is a female Democrat strategist, one of the top in the country, the entire country. I'm trying to, at some point I'll be able to say her name. I can't now. This is what she said. Harris must lay out her own vision on what it will take to secure our borders and end the senseless violence in America's streets and elsewhere. And she is spot on, because this is a Democrat speaking. This is a sober Democrat who understands that it's not going to be enough, I don't think, at the end of the day, for this to kind of go on and be a love fest across the country. I think she's going to need to give some sort of substantive policy proposal as to how she's going to fix immigration and fix the economy and fix crime, so to speak. I'm making it very simplistic because it's hard to just do all three. But she's got to give some sort of, put some meat on the bone here. If she doesn't, I think ultimately they can try for style for a while, but I think that's a risky strategy. I think you got to be substantive, and I think that's the way to do it. And this is what the Democrat operative telling me tonight.
John?
And I'll just say, the Trump campaign has to keep hitting her on doing interviews, on sitting down. I think that's one of the other recourses. I think they've got to tweak their message and bring a little bit more positivity into their message. It can't all be we're living in a failing state. It can't be all, things are falling apart all around you, and it's because of them. There's got to be, I think, a little bit more positivity, a little bit more forward thinking, a little bit more hope in the message. And I think they've got to continue to hammer at Kamala Harris has got to do an interview. She hasn't talked to anybody. She hasn't held a press conference. She hasn't done anything like that. I think that's a big strategy for them too, is to get her to stop doing, to do more than just these speeches before big crowds where she can bask in the adoration. That's got to be a major point, and we're already starting to see them do that.
All right. Well, David Brody, John Stolness, thank you for being here tonight, breaking that down, this breaking news today, where we had Kamala Harris pick her vice president nominee, and that is Governor Tim Walz there from Minnesota. So thank you all for joining us. Appreciate it. We will be back and on covering all sides of this, just like we did the RNC convention there, and this breaking news as well. And so when there is breaking news on these campaign fronts, we will be here to break it all down for you. So thanks, gentlemen. Appreciate it. And thank you all for being here and for watching and reading CBN News. God bless. We'll see you next time.